So, like, from what I understand, Genshin is a game about elements and buff management. Elements and resource management is basically what it is, right? So, elements are like the Pokemon rock paper scissors kind of deal. You wanna make sure that your elemental things are good, right? So, for example, in the thing that I just in floor 5 that I just did, right? There are cryo slimes on the first half, and there's a pyro abyss mage on the second half, right? No matter how built your character is, if I put my Ganyu on the first half, I'm not gonna have a good time. Ganyu's not gonna do any damage because these cryo slimes are literally immune to her cryo damage, right? It doesn't matter. You can have like C6, CR5 Ganyu, doesn't matter, right? Same thing with pyro abyss mage. You could have a fucking C6 Hu Tao. Doesn't matter, right? Hu Tao can't do damage to the incorrect element, right? So first you need to keep that in mind, and also realize that reactions are a huge part of this game and where damage comes from, right? So you want to think about your elements, make sure your team's elements synergize, and then the second thing that Genshin is about is buff management. So let's look at some common teams. Like, say this one, I guess, right? Raiden, Miko, Kazuha, Bennett. Raiden has a buff, the eyeball, right? The eyeball's pretty easy to keep uptime on. You don't really have to think about it that much. So that's one buff that you want to maintain and keep uptime on. And then Miko has her 3 turrets that you want to try and keep and have uptime on, right? So part of the game is managing these buffs and keeping these things up. Kazuha has a buff where when he swirls Electro, or when he swirls an element, he gives your team elemental damage bonus of that type. So that's another buff that you want to kind of keep in mind. And then, of course, there's also Bennett's buff as well. That's another buff that you need to, like, juggle and try and keep up. So in Genshin, you want to stack as many buffs as possible, and then, like, unload all of your damage while you have your buffs up. That's kind of like a general rule, right? Try and have your damage going while your buffs are up. You want to stack as many buffs as possible at the same time, because that's how you do lots of damage, right? So that's how I feel Genshin kind of operates at a fundamental level on those two axes. Understanding how the element system works, right? If you understand that, and you understand that you want to, like, have all 4 characters have their buffs up and have all 4 characters doing something at the same time, that's like 40-50% of the game right there. Buff uptime, team rotation, basic system mechanics, exactly. Why don't I give you a demonstration? So this is one of the most popular teams in the game. Or, like, these 3 are the fucking strongest character. These 3 are considered one of the strongest characters in the game. Have you seen that meme about My Hero Academia and how it's like, these are the big 3, right? So these 3 right here are the big 3. Bennett is, what's his face? The phasing guy. What's the phasing guy? That goes power while, you know, running around ass naked because his Mario? Is that actually his name? So Bennett is Mirio Togata, alright? Xingqiu is Tamaki Amajiki, and then finally Shengli is Nejire, alright? Nejire Hado, alright? So these 3 characters are considered the big 3. And the reason for that is that they have insane synergy with each other. And so I can go ahead and demonstrate that real quick. Right, so a super common team that you're going to see is going to be these 3 characters, Shengling, Xingqiu, and Bennett, and then plus usually a flex character. Often, sometimes something like an Anemo Swirler character, or maybe a defensive option like this, or I don't know. Do people or oh yeah, there's one comp that uses a Raiden. Right, yeah, those 3, the big 3 plus 1 off slot is nicknamed the national comp. So sometimes you do Kazuha, sometimes you do this guy, Sucrose, sometimes you could do Raiden. I sometimes like to run Zhongli if I feel like I need to be really defensive, you know, etc., etc., right? But for the most part, these 3 are the core. So these 3 are really good at demonstrating the thing that I just talked about, which is understanding the elemental system and buff management. So I think this is like these three are like core Genshin Impact. There's a video by 1010 that kind of explains why this team is so good. When you have a team, you want to think, okay, where is my damage going to come from? And you want to try and amplify and buff that character's damage as much as possible. So in this team composition, a lot of your damage is going to be coming from Shangling, from her Pyronado, right? So let's go ahead and just run up and just use Pyronado. All right, how much damage do we do? So we seem to be doing 7,000 damage per tick, right? 7,000 damage. Okay, cool, right? Every time it spins around, boom, 7,000, boom, 7,000, boom, 7,000. Oh, hey, she's almost dying. Right, cool, fantastic. All right, let's write that down. Cool. So let's talk about buffs, right? Bennett, I can't swap right now, but Bennett is a character whose burst gives a buttload of attack damage to any character that's standing on top of it. So let's see what happens if we use Bennett buff and then we use Shangling burst on top of it. So here we go, switch to Bennett, drop the thing, switch to Shangling, do the Pyronado. How much damage do we got going on? 12,800 damage with Bennett buff, right? So let's go ahead and plug it into a calculator. Here's a calculator, right? We increase our damage by 83% just by switching the order of our buttons, by pressing Bennett buff first and then Shangling buff. Now, let's talk about the elemental reaction side, right? So when Hydro and Pyro react with each other, they do something called they have something called like a multiplicative reaction, which is like, oh, you'll do 50% more damage, or you'll do 100% more damage, right? So when a Pyro hits something that's affected by Hydro, you'll do a Vaporize reaction, and you'll do 50% more damage, or more than 50% more damage, depending on how much Elemental Mastery you have. Right, so let's go ahead and see what happens then, right? So how this team works is you have Xingqiu going, and when Xingqiu, or when your character auto-attacks, he sends out these rain swords right there. You see that? And then now all of those enemies have Hydro on top of them. So when we go ahead and swap to Shangling and do our burst, let's see how much damage our thing is doing. What are we doing? 15k. So 15.4k. Right, so let me go ahead and plug that into a calculator again. And here we are. By proccing Vaporize, we've increased our damage by 120%. Which is you know, that's kind of good, right? Doubling your damage just by proccing a reaction is pretty good, right? That's because my Shangling has a lot of elemental mastery. Now, let's say we combine these two. Let's say we have Bennett buffing our burst, and we have Xingqiu Vaporize going off at the same time, right? What does that look like? So let's go ahead and pop this, pop that, pop this. Go ahead and activate Xingqiu burst, and then let's see if we can get some water on these guys, and let's see how much damage they're gonna do. If I can crit, please. 26k, 2654. So 26.5k. Now back to the calculator. Whoop. Let's go ahead and plug those numbers in. We have almost quadrupled our damage. We have almost quadrupled our damage just by having Bennett buff up and by having Xingqiu rain swords going. Let's kind of talk about how this composition operates in practice, right? So again, right, drop the Bennett buff, drop the Kazuha buff, right, have this going, and then have this going, right? So you got buffs going, you got Vaporize proccing, and then what you also want to be doing during this time is something called funneling energy, right? So Shangling has a really high cost burst. It costs 80 energy, and you want, since that's your main source of damage, you want to make sure that's up as much as possible. So Shangling doesn't generate enough energy to keep it up by herself, but luckily on this team we have someone who generates lots of pyro energy, who will, you know, supply Shangling with plenty of energy to keep her burst up, and that is Bennett. Right, so every time you cast an elemental skill, you generate those little biddies right there, right? And those biddies are what fill up your elemental burst gauge. So part of the game is also balancing it and making sure that all of your bursts are up at the same time, right? So what we can do is we do something called battering. So every time you make these particles, the particles are what increase your energy, and the character on field gets bonus energy. So what you do is you have a character like Bennett, you activate a skill, and then while the particles are in flight, you swap to Xiangling like this, and then Xiangling gets all the bonus energy, and that's called a funneling or battery or both. I don't know, whatever, right? And by doing this, you can give Xiangling a lot of energy to keep her burst up without needing to build like 300% energy recharge on Xiangling, you know? Right? So, let's go ahead and do that some more. Do this, do this, do this. Right? And so, like, while you're playing this team, what you should be doing is constantly swapping to Bennett, doing that, and then funneling energy into Xiangling. So boom, right? Funnel energy, right? And then she gets more and more energy. And what happens is, if you do this correctly, you should more or less have enough energy to keep your burst going as much as possible, right? So there you go, right? If you look at my energy gauge, Xiangling's burst is almost full, which is awesome, right? So these three characters, Bennett, Xiangling, and Xingqiu, are kind of like one of the best examples of how this game is supposed to be played, right? It uses reactions, it uses buff management, it uses energy management, and my Xiangling is dying, but right, it's pretty fantastic. Okay, so whenever you're looking at other team compositions, you should also kind of think of that, right? What's kind of reaction is this team going to be based on? Where is my damage going to be coming from? What buffs do I need to think about? What about energy management, right? If I'm trying to keep all my bursts up at the same time, you know, what kind of rotation should I be doing? When should I be swapping in characters? When should I be using their skills? Where should the energy be going? Etc., etc., right? There you go. But yeah, thanks for watching. This was done live off the cuff, on the fly, over at my Twitch stream. You guys should go ahead and totally come and hang out, and it'll be fantastic. All right. I don't have an outro. Shit. Okay, fantastic. Oh yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let me know what you think about running around ass naked because his Mario in the comments below. With that being said, let's get right into it. You know what I'm saying?